and we finally made it to the end of this ruby slipper saga. And boy, it's quite a climactic ending. Hello fellow Aussians, and welcome to the channel. Earlier this week, Heritage Auctions auctioned off the pair of ruby slippers that were stolen from the Judy Garland Museum and later recovered by the FBI. And boy, was it a sale to remember. The ruby slippers shattered every single record. Not only for Wizard of Oz movie props, but also for movie memorabilia ever. The ruby slippers sold for a whopping $28 million. And the crazy part about the auction is that this happened within seconds. The auction started at $1.5 million and rose to that $28 million. So quickly that it's almost insane seeing the live footage from the auction. This, of course, shatters many records. One of them being the previous pair of ruby slippers that were sold and bought by multiple people. Those sold for $2 million. Of course, now that looks like pennies. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that one sink in. The other record that it also breaks is the highest auctioned piece of movie memorabilia. And that was previously the subway dress that Marilyn Monroe wore in the 7-Year Itch. And I gotta tell you, when that auction happened, I remember the buzz around that dress and being really annoyed that a Marilyn Monroe dress was worth more than the ruby slippers, considering everyone agreed, at least I believed, that the most valuable piece and the most recognizable piece of movie memorabilia was the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. So, I'm glad that at least they're now back on top. Now that $28 million that the ruby slippers went up to is actually not the final price that the person is going to have to pay. There's a buyer's premium, which means that whoever won the ruby slippers will have to pay a whopping $32.5 million. Yeah, I don't know who has that kind of money, but, okay. We see you, whoever you are. That's another aspect of this auction, is that we do not know who won the ruby slippers and whether they will be able to be viewed by the public at all in the future. That's a very big question mark. For those of you who are wondering whether the Judy Garland Museum is the ones who won the slippers, we do have an answer for that one. And this comes from an article from the New York Times. Jane Heitz, the executive director of the Judy Garland Museum, had said that the museum was raising money from donors to win back the slippers at the auction and had been given $100,000 by the Minnesota legislator. But Mrs. Heitz said on Saturday that she realized at a very early stage in the auction that the museum would not win the bid. It's kind of closing the book on a chapter of the ruby slippers for us, and that's okay, Miss Heitz said. I think it's a testament to how important The Wizard of Oz is to the world that they sold for that much. For $20,000, the museum did buy a painting depicting the scene where the Wicked Witch's hands are zapped as she tries to take Dorothy's slippers, Miss Heitz said. The money from the legislator, minus some small sum that was used to try to facilitate the purchase, will go back to the state, she said. The money raised by donors may go to a Wizard of Oz themed miniature golf course or some other exhibit, Miss Heitz said. So at least we have an answer from the Judy Garland Museum as far as what they're going to do with their money. And I will say that I never thought for 1 second that the Judy Garland Museum was going to get those slippers. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just... it was no way. And the other thing, too, that I don't remember if I said this in the previous video, but I have been thinking this the whole time, that this particular pair of slippers, the story behind them is just too juicy for somebody to not want to have this pair. Because they were stolen, they are recovered, they're just like really famous now, and why wouldn't you, if you had the money, want to own that pair? Now, there is one other thing that we are going to bring up. And that is one little thing that's mentioned in the article a little bit after this. During the film's production, the costume team made at least 4 pairs of slippers for Miss Garland to wear. And that is where we're going to get into another discussion. The idea of another pair of ruby slippers maybe at some point going up for auction. While of course we know the whereabouts of the 4 pairs of slippers that article just mentioned, there is a high possibility that another pair of ruby slippers might pop up, at least in our lifetimes. Just because that's the 4 known pairs, that doesn't mean that another pair of slippers wasn't made for Judy Garland to wear in The Wizard of Oz. Ruby slipper maker Randy Struthers has been studying the ruby slippers for quite some time and identified when each pair of ruby slippers was used in The Wizard of Oz. How did he do this? Well, not all of the ruby slippers are the exact same shape. The heel is slightly different. The bows made slightly differently and positioned differently on the shoes. And he was able to identify that there is at least 1 more pair of slippers that we have never seen before outside of the movie. Maybe one day this pair of slippers will pop up at auction and we will see another mystery pair of ruby slippers get sold. Who knows? The only thing that we do know is that someone paid $32.5 million to own the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz. Now that this saga has come to an end, did you want the slippers to go back to the Judy Garland Museum? Or do you think they should be in another museum? Let's have a discussion down in the comments section. And if you liked that video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. New videos are posted every 2 weeks on the 15th and last day of each month. And if that doesn't satisfy your appetite for Oz, follow the link in the description to ozclub.org and join the International Wizard of Oz Club. Until next time, bye y'all.